What up, Mikey's crew? It's your friend Michael here, and I've decided to just do a new intro now. Hopefully, I can remember that it's what up, Mikey's crew? It's your friend Michael. I'm sure it'll catch on. And welcome, sports fans, as well, as we are here for another edition of Sports Talk. Going to be talking today about the Western Michigan Broncos' huge victory this weekend over Central Michigan, how they became ranked for the first time ever in at least one poll. This is the coaches' poll. And what are their chances the rest of the season now? We'll also talk about the Michigan Wolverines and their slim victory over Wisconsin. Tough, hard battle, but they definitely have some kicking issues. We'll also recap the Mid-American Conference scoreboard, Big Ten scoreboard, talk about some other big games around college football, preview some games for this next week, and also run down the NFL scoreboard. And for the last time this year, we'll be talking about the Detroit Tigers, because their playoff chances gone, as they officially been eliminated with the season being over now. So let's get started. Western Michigan's big win over Central Michigan Saturday night. They defeated the Chippewas up in Mount Pleasant 49-10. Row that boat! Just continue to row. Broncos playing a great, fantastic season so far. I was really nervous for this game, actually. This was basically, in my opinion, Western's last big hurdle. And as a fan, I can look at this because, maybe I can get overconfident about all the other games we have coming up. We got Northern Illinois. Granted, it's a team that Western has not beaten in a while, but this is not a Northern Illinois team that looks that great this year. They are 1-4 so far in the season. Western Michigan still has to, also play Eastern Michigan. I know they're 4-1, but they haven't played that great of competition yet, so we'll have to see about them. There's Akron on the road, which could be a tough game. Kent State on the road, Ball State on the road, and we got Buffalo at home, and then the big game against Toledo at the end of the season. And Toledo could come into that game if they don't lose. They could come in at 10-1. Western could come into the game, I think, 11-0. Could be the biggest showdown in Mid-American Conference history outside of a MAC championship game. So we'll have to see if that all pans out. But anyways, going up to Mount Pleasant, it's a hostile environment up there. It was a sellout crowd. Central Michigan got the ball first and was really moving on Western's defense to start the game. And I thought P.J. Fleck did a really smart thing. He called a timeout on Central's first drive, and it stopped Central's momentum because when they came back out on the field, they could not convert on another first down. Central kicked a field goal to make it 3-0. And it was like that for a while. Western Michigan, I think on their first two drives, actually did not score any points before they finally were able to punch it into the end zone. But you know how, like in basketball, you will see teams call a timeout to stop a team's momentum. Basically, that's what P.J. Fleck did on that first drive. Very smart of him to do that. After that, and Western got on the board, they really had the momentum the rest of the game. They put a lot of pressure on Cooper Rush, sacked him 6 times. I believe it was in the first half. I think they ended up with 7. He was pressured all game. He threw a pick that was returned for a touchdown in the second half. In fact, that was when Central was driving to start the second half, and it was 28-3. And maybe if they made it 28-10, they would have had momentum on their side. But then after that pick 6 for a touchdown, it's kind of what broke the camel's back. And then the place really cleared out after that. It was full of Bronco fans that went. And after that, Western dominated the rest of the game. There were a couple of injuries in the game. Jamari Bogan went down. Not sure what his status is for this Saturday. He might be back out on the field. But Jarvion Franklin, did a great job. And this isn't just a backup coming into the game. Jarvion Franklin, you shouldn't look at him as a backup running back. Him and Jamari Bogan trade off. Bogan is more of the speed back, where Franklin is more of the power back. And Franklin, for the first time since basically he was there as a freshman, got the majority of the carries. Of course, they're without Levante Bellamy as well right now, so they couldn't go back to him. They did put in Tucker late in the game, and he did a great job running the ball as well. He would be, I believe, more of a speed back, what Bogan would be, to complement Franklin. But Franklin had over 100 yards on the day. In fact, he ended up with 132 on the ground. Fabian Johnson, who actually really never carries the ball, carried it 2 times for 45 yards, got himself into the end zone as well. But Tucker had 11 carries for 36 yards. Yeah, Bogan unfortunately got hurt on his first carry of the game. We'll have to see if he'll be back for the Northern Illinois game. The other injury was Carrington Thompson, who got hit by a Central Michigan player when he was going up for a catch. It looked like on the play that Central Michigan should be charged with a targeting call. It was reviewed, but it was overturned. It was originally called targeting. It was overturned. I really do not know why this was overturned. Although they did say after halftime when the announcers went and talked with the refs that they thought the contact happened up in the shoulder area first. But if you look at the replay, it might have the hit might have grazed the shoulder, the Central Michigan player's helmet, but it was more like right in the ear hole. And if that was just a shoulder hit, Carrington Thompson would not have been reacting the way he was. After he got hit, he was down for a little bit. He got up and tried to walk off the field and basically fell flat on his face to the ground. He fell right to his knees and then fell right on his face, basically. And you're not going to do that if that is just simply if that's simply a hit to the shoulder. So I thought that was definitely a targeting call that should have been called, and it wasn't. And I kind of wonder if they didn't do it because of the fact they're up there in Central Michigan territory. Let me turn on the light really quickly. There we go. That's better. So you can see my face more. We were getting some natural light, but all of a sudden, I guess the clouds moved in. But yeah, that was not called targeting, but just to kind of go the other way a little bit and talk about the Michigan State-Indiana game for a second, there was a call in that game where a Michigan State player actually hit Lego, Indiana's quarterback, with his helmet like right on the chest. Like it wasn't even close to the head. It was like hit him right here in the chest, and it was called targeting. And I don't get it. I mean, if hitting somebody in the head's not targeting, but hitting somebody in the chest is, the definition of targeting is getting out of hand, and we haven't had this definition for too long. So let's talk about some of the stats in the game. Zach Terrell, 15 of 21 for 170 yards, 3 touchdowns. Cooper Rush was 17 of 29 for 178 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Central Michigan was held to 99 yards rushing. That's because Cooper Rush was, like I think I said, sacked 7 times. So he ended up with negative 31 yards rushing. Franklin had 132 yards, like I said. Fabian Johnson, 45. Franklin had 2 touchdowns, by the way, as well. Eskridge, 2 carries, 19 yards. Zach Terrell ran once for 12. Jackson, 1 for 7, and then Bogan, 1 for 3. Corey Davis, 6 receptions for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michael Henry, 4 for 30 and a touchdown. Carrington Thompson had 1 reception for 22 yards. That actually might have been the one where he got hit, and I thought it should have been called targeting. Western did, besides the interception, force a fumble, which was also recovered by Darius Phillips as well. They hit Cooper Rush pretty hard. The ball popped out, and Western ended up recovering it. So, actually, yeah, Phillips caused it. Adams recovered it is what it was. And by the way, got to mention as well, Corey Davis set the all-time Mid-American Conference receiving record with total yards that he broke, actually, former Western Michigan Bronco wide receiver Jordan White's record. He also passed his brother Titus Davis for touchdowns, career touchdowns. So he passed his brother, so that's great to see as well. So Western Michigan wins that game 49-10. They take on Northern Illinois this Saturday. Northern Illinois comes in the game without their starting quarterback, Drew Hare, who did go down with an injury early in the season. That could bode well for the Broncos, as Northern Illinois won't have a really experienced quarterback. Although, you can't say that experienced because their quarterback they have now will have at least played I think 4 or 5 games coming in. So he's going to have some experience under his shoulders. Northern Illinois does give up a lot of points. They do give up a lot of yards. Their defense is not that great. So Western could have a pretty easy time, I think, running and passing the ball all game. Western's defense, got to force those turnovers still and keep limiting their penalties like they've been doing. And I definitely think Western Michigan can come out of this with a big victory. They're an 18.5-point favorite, but PJ Fleck said he makes sure that his team understands going into the game that they're not the favorite, that they basically play like with a chip on their shoulder, that they're the underdog. And for this game, I think that's going to be a great thing to do because they haven't beat Northern Illinois in so long. So since they haven't, you gotta say, hey, this team has had our number for many, many years. Let's go out and show them that we're boss now, kind of deal. So I think Western Michigan comes out of this with a big win. It's homecoming for the Broncos as well. Probably going to be a big crowd. 6:30 start, by the way, time on CBS Sports Network if you can't make it to the game. I'm going to say Western Michigan wins this game by a score of 42-13 over Northern Illinois. So let's get some stats for the Central game, too. Western Michigan 11 of 14 on third downs. That is absolutely fantastic. Continue that success heading into Northern Illinois game. 1 for 1 on fourth down. They had 424 yards of offense to Central's 277. 178 passing for Central to 170 for Western. But 254 on the ground to 99 for Central. Western 3 penalties for 30 yards. Central 5 for 60. They had the 2 turnovers. Central did have the ball more than Western in this game by about 3 minutes. 31-39 to 28-21. And Western had 22 first downs to Central Michigan's 18. So in our next segment, we'll talk about the Mid-American Conference scoreboard. All right, for the rest of the Mid-American Conference scoreboard, BYU defeats Toledo as time expires 55-53. Toledo had scored a touchdown, went for 2 and got it, but BYU kicks a field goal and defeats Toledo 55-53. That could be Toledo's only loss heading into the Western game coming up last week of the season. Buffalo was trounced by Boston College 35-3. Ohio gets a late defensive touchdown to seal a victory over Miami of Ohio 17-7. Eastern Michigan beats Bowling Green on the road, by the way, 28-25. That puts Eastern Michigan at 4-1 on the year. Akron over Kent State 31-27. Northern Illinois gets their first win of the season as they take down Ball State 31-24. Now let's move on to the Big Ten Conference scoreboard. Run down their scores really quickly here. Ohio State shuts down Rutgers. In fact, completely shuts them out. 58-0. Nebraska scores 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns to run away from Illinois 31-16. Indiana, in overtime, defeats Michigan State 24-21 as Indiana scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and got that field goal in overtime. Northwestern stuns Iowa 38-31. Maryland trounces Purdue 50-7, and Penn State in overtime defeats Minnesota 29-26. In that game, by the way, Penn State's kicker was getting into it big time with the Minnesota return team. In fact, earlier in the game, Minnesota was basically trying to take down their kicker, Julius. And later in the game, he had kicked a kickoff return for a touchback, and a Minnesota player just came in and wailed on him. Minnesota player was ejected for the game for a flagrant hit. He definitely deserved to get ejected for hitting somebody that hard on a kick return that was a touchback. However, the hit to me did not look to be that vicious. The Penn State kicker actually sold it, made it look worse than what it was. I guess that's why he's a kicker, because I guess if he's going to dish it out, he's got to learn to take it. And he definitely didn't take that hit very well. Any other player, I think, they got a hit like that, if you look at it, is going to get up. He basically he acted like he got hit right in the head. And even if you look at this, this is going in real time instead of slow motion, he definitely got nailed right in the left shoulder pad. He got hit right in the left shoulder and acted like, he took the most vicious hit in the world. Well, I guess if you're a kicker, you're going to act like that because, like I said, this guy's a big dude, and he dishes out hits. But if he can't take them, then he should stop dishing them out. That's all I'm going to say. Stop being a sissy kicker. All right, moving on, talking about Michigan. In their game against Wisconsin, the Wolverines won the game 14-7 in a low-scoring affair. However, this game could have actually not been as close as what it was if Michigan had made any field goals. Kenny Allen in this game missed 2 field goals, and then they put in a new kicker, Tice, who missed 1 as well. Michigan might be holding open tryouts for kickers. You might want to check that out to see if they are, so you can go maybe get a scholarship or a walk-on or walk right on Michigan's team, because you might have a chance because of the fact that their kicking game is atrocious. I mean, it's absolutely pitiful. But Michigan got away with the win 14-7. This is kind of the game that we thought that Michigan was going to have last year against Northwestern, was a low-scoring affair like this, and it turned out into a 38-0 shutout for Michigan instead. On the day, Wisconsin's offense didn't do a whole lot. Hornibrook for Wisconsin was 9-25, threw for 88 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Now, just hearing those stats for Wisconsin in the passing game, you're thinking right now Michigan won this game by a lot larger margin than 14-7, but they didn't. On the ground, Corey Clement, 17 carries, 68 yards, and in fact, Wisconsin only had 71 yards rushing as well. We had Kenny Allen missed 2, Tice missed 1. Definitely not a good day for the kickers. Michigan receiving-wise, Amara Darbo, 6 receptions, 87 yards. Chesson, 5 for 52. Jake Butt, 3 for 31. In fact, Darbo had the big one in the fourth quarter to put Michigan up 14-7. Davion Smith led the rushing attack, 17 carries, 66 yards. Ty Isaac, 8 for 48. Evans, 8 for 34. Michigan ended up with 130 yards on the ground. Wilton Spate, 20 of 32, 219 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception in the game. And Jordan Lewis, by the way, if you haven't checked it out, had a one-handed interception as he's falling to the ground. He catches the ball in his hand, falling backwards, and secures it against his body going to the ground. One of the greatest interceptions I have ever seen. So if you have not checked that out, all you have to do is probably YouTube Jordan Lewis, and you'll guarantee to find it. But then here's the team stats right here. First downs, Michigan won 21-8. Both teams were atrocious on third down, as Michigan was 3 of 15, Wisconsin 4 of 15. Total yards, 349 for Michigan to 159 for Wisconsin. 130 rushing yards to 71. Michigan had 6 penalties for 45 yards. Wisconsin 3 for 30. And that 3 turnovers to 1 ratio. And possession, Michigan 35 minutes, 41 seconds to 24-19 for Wisconsin. So just reading the stats, you would think Michigan won this game by a lot larger margin, and it should have been. If they had made all 3 field goals, they win this game 23-7. And Wisconsin probably actually drops farther in the rankings because of that. Probably isn't even included in the playoff talk still. And in fact, you know what? I wouldn't even include Wisconsin in this playoff talk. To tell you the truth, Wisconsin so far, everybody's hyping up that, they beat Michigan State and they beat LSU. But if you take a look at both those teams, they are not vintage teams. LSU has already fired Les Miles. They have 2 losses on the year. Michigan State has 2 losses on the year. You say early on that, oh my gosh, Wisconsin had such a big win. They had a top 5 win, and then they had a top 10 win. Both one on the road, one at a neutral site. And, we were saying so early in the year, Texas beat Notre Dame, and Texas is back. They had such a great victory, and look at where Texas is now. Their defense is atrocious. Notre Dame, lost to Michigan State, so Michigan State had such a great victory, but look at Notre Dame, they're not that great. So when we say that these teams have great victories early in the season, we should be cautious when we say this because of the fact, that either 0 games have been played at that point or only 1 or 2, and we haven't seen these teams maybe play their greatest, toughest challenges yet. Now, if it got to be late in the season and Michigan's playing Ohio State and say both teams are undefeated heading into that game and Michigan beat Ohio State, you can say that is a great victory because both teams played great the entire season. But when you say, oh, Wisconsin had such a great victory over LSU, and you say that early in the season, but you get to the end of the year and say LSU finishes 8-4, 7-5, it wasn't as great as a victory because LSU was so overrated. And you say, oh, they had such a great victory over Michigan State. But Michigan State, at the end of the year, could end up being an 8-4 team as well, or Notre Dame. That was such a great victory for Michigan State. And Notre Dame finishes 6-6. Yeah, it might be great that you beat your rivals. It might be great that you got a win. Or that Texas beat Notre Dame. And, oh, God, Texas football's back. And we're going to be so awesome again. But early in the season, you got to temper yourself. And now that we're, a quarter of the way through or over a quarter of the way through for some teams, you can really literally start saying now when Michigan beat Wisconsin, you could kind of say, oh, yeah, that's a pretty good win. But I wouldn't say it's the greatest victory, definitely, of the season. And it shouldn't be. Wisconsin, yes, came in as a top 10 team, but remember, like I said, they beat an LSU team that was way overrated. They beat a Michigan State team that's been overrated. So Wisconsin could be overrated as well. And I would actually, like I said, not even include them in playoff talk because of the way they played offensively. If you can't play that well offensively, you shouldn't even include them in the playoff talk. So it's a good victory for Michigan, but it could have been better. It definitely could have been a whole lot better than what it was. Next week, Michigan plays Rutgers. They go on the road. They look to continue their winning ways, and they should against Rutgers. Rutgers, big playmaker, is out for the rest of the year. They don't have any offensive weapons. Their defense is not that great, as you noticed against Ohio State. Michigan did lose the last time they were out there, but that was under Brady Hoke. Hopefully things change. That's how Rutgers got their first actually Big Ten victory ever. Hopefully things change. I believe they will. Michigan right now is close to a 25-point favorite. I think Michigan wins this game probably by a score of 42 to, I'll give Rutgers 3 points. 42-3 final score, Michigan wins this game. So I'm projecting Michigan wins and Western Michigan wins. Now, I'm talking about, I'm getting down on Wisconsin for not having great wins. And, Western Michigan beat Northwestern and Illinois. And you might say, well, those aren't great wins. Illinois is not that great. Northwestern's pretty mediocre. But that's kind of comparing apples and oranges, in my opinion. Wisconsin's playing a team that from the SEC, well, you're talking Big Ten versus SEC. So power conference against power conference. Whereas Western, a Mid-American Conference team, a smaller mid-major school taking on a Big Ten team, that is a bigger deal for a victory. And Northwestern just beat Iowa, who, granted, Iowa is not that great. They're showing it. They've already lost to North Dakota State this year. They've now lost to Northwestern. They could end up being a 7-5, maybe an 8-4 team. 6-6 at probably the worst. But Northwestern, any team that they beat strengthens Western's schedule. Any team Illinois beats strengthens Western's schedule. Illinois probably is going to be that great. They're probably going to go 4-8, 3-9 on the year. If they surprise someone, maybe 5-7. And Northwestern could end up being, a 6-6 team. I mean, that would mean Western beat a mediocre Big Ten team. But you know what? You still beat a bigger boy, in my opinion. So I think really, you can criticize me in the comments if you want, but that's not fair that I'm saying Western had a great win, but Wisconsin didn't over LSU or Texas didn't over Notre Dame. But at the time, it looked great for them. But as the season rolls on, it doesn't look as great as what we thought it was. Whereas Western's win, it's like, hey, you beat a power team, that gets you noticed. And they're ranked in the top 25 in the coaches poll, first time ever in history. They're just ranked outside in the AP poll. They're ranked 26th. With a win against Northern Illinois, they should actually sneak in to the 25th spot. And really, Western isn't going to move up a whole lot in the polls unless teams in front of them do lose. So, because, I mean, you're beating a Mid-American Conference team who technically isn't as great as you. So you're not going to jump leaps and bounds in the polls, but you will move up if a team does lose. That will be the case for Western. So like I said, I think Michigan wins. Michigan wins next week over Rutgers, and Western will defeat Northern Illinois. So now let's go on talk about the rest of the Big Ten scoreboard in our next segment, and then we'll talk about also the other big games from this past weekend in college football. Sorry, I forgot. I already talked about the Big Ten scoreboard, so we'll talk about the other big games from this past weekend in college football. Last Friday, Washington defeated Stanford. Washington 10th ranked, Stanford 7th, 44-6. Stanford no longer in playoff consideration, I would say. Washington, you could say, I guess they're for real now. They hadn't played anybody up to this point, but I guess you could say they're real. Alabama defeated Kentucky 34-6. The biggest game last weekend was definitely Clemson against Louisville. Louisville got down in this game 28-10, came back, took the lead, lost it in the fourth quarter, had a chance to possibly take the lead late. They had to convert a 4th and 12, and they ended up about a yard short. Clemson wins 42-36. Texas A&M defeats South Carolina 24-13. If you didn't see the Tennessee-Georgia game, go back and watch this if you can find it. I'm sure you can. Georgia got up in this game 17-0 on Tennessee. Tennessee came back, took the lead late, 28-24. Georgia hit a touchdown pass with 10 seconds left to take it take a 31-28 lead over Tennessee. And this wasn't just like a cheap touchdown. This was like a 40-yard touchdown pass. Tennessee comes back, and with help of a couple of penalties, gets a Hail Mary pass from Josh Dobbs, caught in the end zone. Tennessee wins 34-31. Georgia fans were probably all celebrating, and then they were all crying after that game. North Carolina wins 37-35 over Florida State. There's a team that probably we thought was better than what they were, but they're not. North Carolina kicked a 54-yard field goal to win the game. They had given up the lead with less than 30 seconds to go, with the help of a penalty as well that put them in field goal range. Baylor comes back to defeat Iowa State 45-42. Number 14 Miami defeats Georgia Tech 35-21. Number 19 San Diego State, they're upset by South Alabama 42-24. How about Oklahoma? They defeat TCU 52-46. Entering that last quarter, TCU trailed 49-24 before they mounted a large comeback. Oklahoma State defeats number 22 Texas 49-31. Notre Dame defeats Syracuse 50-33. And how about Colorado? They defeat Oregon State 47-6. Probably Michigan's best win of the year might not be Wisconsin. It might be that Colorado victory, to tell you the truth. Colorado definitely looks a lot better than what they were. They're now ranked in the top 25 again. This team is a pretty good team, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, they're up 21-7 on Michigan early on. But I knew Colorado was better than what they were. I could tell it in the first two games that they played, and they're looking for pretty good this year. They've already beat Oregon and Oregon State. So continue to look for Colorado. I think for the rest of the season, they're going to be a pretty darn good team, I would say. Don't put it past them to win quite a few games, and they will be going bowling later in the year. LSU defeats Missouri 42-7. USC defeats Arizona State 41-20. In fact, that's Colorado's next opponent, USC. And UCLA defeats Arizona 45-24. Probably the last big games of the week. So let's preview some of the games to watch out for this upcoming Saturday. By the way, Michigan's going to be taking on Rutgers 7 o'clock this upcoming Saturday. So keep an eye out for that game. I forgot if it was on ESPN or not. I think it is, but we'll definitely get that for you right here. All right, let's run down some of the big games this upcoming weekend. If you want to tune in to some Big Ten action, Iowa takes on Minnesota on ESPN2 at noon as Minnesota looks to get their first win in Big Ten play. Notre Dame is at NC State. That game is on ABC, also at noon. Let's see. Indiana at Ohio State, 3:30 on ESPN. Does Indiana have another shot maybe to upset a ranked opponent? We'll have to wait and see on that. BYU at Michigan State, that's on 3:30. Colorado's at number 21 Colorado at USC, 4 o'clock on the Pac-12 network. Here's a game for you on the CBS. Number 9 Tennessee at number 8 Texas A&M. 3:30, like I said, on CBS. CBS Sports Network at 6:30, like I said, Northern Illinois taking on Western Michigan. Number 1 Alabama at number 16 Arkansas, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Michigan is on ESPN2, by the way, at 7 o'clock. At 8 o'clock on ABC, number 23 Florida State, number 10 Miami. Miami could drop Florida State to 3-3 on the year. We'll have to wait and see. And those are your big games from this upcoming weekend. So after this, we'll talk about the NFL. We are now a quarter way through the season in the NFL. We'll talk about the standings and talk about the scores from this past weekend as well. All right, to run down the NFL scoreboard. Last Thursday, the Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Miami Dolphins 22-7. Jacksonville Jaguars played in London against the Indianapolis Colts, got their first win as they won 30-27. Texans defeated the Titans 27-20. Redskins beat the Browns 30-31-20. Seahawks took care of the Jets 27-17. The Bills shut out the Patriots 16-0. Falcons, wow, what a day Matt Ryan had. Over 500 yards passing. Julio Jones over 300 yards receiving, defeat the Panthers 48-33. Cam Newton knocked out of the game with a concussion. Raiders go on the road, defeat the Ravens 28-27. Bears beat the Lions 17-14. How about Denver? They defeat Tampa Bay 27-7. Trevor Siemian knocked out of the game with a bruised shoulder, may be back next week. Rams defeat the Cardinals 17-13. Saints come back to defeat the Chargers 35-34, get their first win of the year. Cowboys improved to 3-1, take down the 49ers 24-17. Steelers trounced the Chiefs 43-14. And on Monday Night Football, Vikings improved to 4-0 as they take down the Giants 24-10. So let's look ahead to Week 5 here in the NFL, and then we'll go over the standings. Thursday Night Football, Cardinals at the 49ers, both teams 1-3. And then on Sunday, Patriots at the Browns. Tom Brady, he'll be back, should take care of the Browns. Eagles 3-0 at the Lions, who are 1-3. Good luck, Detroit. You're going to need it. Bears at the Colts. Titans at the Dolphins. Redskins at the Ravens. Texans at the Vikings. That should be a pretty good game. Jets at the Steelers. Those are your 1 o'clock games. Now for your 4 o'clock games. Falcons at the Broncos. Should be an excellent game to see. Bengals at the Cowboys. Bills at the Rams. And Chargers at the Raiders. Your Sunday night game. Giants at Green Bay. And Monday night, Buccaneers at the Panthers. So let's take a look at the standings now, as we are now a quarter of the way through the NFL season. We'll find out where all the teams are and what teams are looking good for the playoffs, what teams are looking bad. Right now in the AFC in the East, the Patriots lead with a 3-1 mark. I do expect them to win that division. With Tom Brady back now, they're set up pretty well. Pittsburgh and Baltimore both 3-1. However, I believe Pittsburgh is the better team in that division. I believe they will capture it. In the AFC South, Texans 3-1, and everybody else is trailing really, really badly to them. I think the Texans win this division. This is a pretty weak division, though. Denver leads the AFC West. They're 4-0. I think they will win that division. I think the two wild cards in the AFC are going to be Oakland, and I'm going to say that Cincinnati gets the other wild card. In the NFC, that's at this moment a quarter of the way through the season. That could easily change. Eagles lead the NFC East. Cowboys right behind them at 3-1. In the NFC North, Vikings lead at 4-0. Green Bay is 2-1. The NFC South, it's basically just like the AFC South. Falcons 3-1, and everybody else is 1-3. Rams and Seahawks both lead the NFC West. They're both 3-1. Right now, I'm going to say your wild card winners are going to be Green Bay and Dallas at this point. However, that could easily change in the future. So that's the NFL standings. And let's talk about the Detroit Tigers really quickly here to just end sports talk for this week. They will not be heading to the 2016 Major League Baseball playoffs. In fact, this past week against the Indians, they had a game that was actually rained out. It wouldn't have mattered even if they had to come back and make it up because they still wouldn't have been in the playoffs. If they would have been significant enough where they would have had a chance to make it, they would have had to play the game. But thankfully for Cleveland, they didn't have to play it. But unfortunately for the Tigers, they didn't get a chance to. They won 12-0 against Cleveland, and then they had a rain out, or they had a game go 5 innings, so they beat Cleveland again. They were going to play them Thursday. That's the one that got rained out. They went down to Atlanta. They won their first game against the Braves, but then they could not win the next two. In fact, they got shut out 1-0 on Sunday. Even if they had won the game, it would not have mattered because Toronto and Baltimore had both won. The Tigers would have had to have been at least a half game back or a half game ahead to make up that game to basically get a shot at the wild card game. So unfortunately, the Tigers did not make the playoffs. What really cost them this year? Well, a couple things. Bullpen, still a concern for the Tigers. They gave up too many late inning leads that really cost them. Some were by the reliever, K-Rod. Others were by some of the other relievers. Also, inconsistent hitting hurt the Tigers as well. They played the Atlanta Braves, one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, and lost to them 1-0 on Sunday. When you're facing an opponent that is that inferior, you've got to score some runs. And, it just goes to show you, they scored 12 against Cleveland, and then they couldn't even score against the Braves. I know Cleveland was not playing, a lot of their starters that game, but still, that's inexcusable. You've got to score runs. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't score runs. And it was really inconsistent. You'd see this year where Tigers would come out and they'd score 5, 6, 7 runs, and the next game they'd score 1 or 2. They've got to, put a more consistent lineup together, in my opinion. If they can do that, they can compete at the playoffs next year. Their starting pitching also was a concern. Of course, there were some injuries in there. I do understand, Jordan Zimmerman was injured, Mike Pelfrey was injured. So you had to rely on starters like Matt Boyd, who did okay, Anibal Sanchez, who did not have a great year. I don't think he'll be back next year. But the Tigers have got to find some better starting pitchers. I mean, you did find one this year that came up from the minors, Michael Fulmer. Definitely he's in the rotation. Verlander's in the rotation. Both of them were basically the pitchers you could almost count on for wins if the Tigers could score runs. I would say if Zimmerman comes back healthy, he'll be fine next year. But what do you do for your 4 and 5 starters? I would definitely say Daniel Norris did pretty well late in the year coming back. If he's fully healthy, you should have 4 good starters. It's about finding that 5th starter. You either bring Sanchez back, give him another chance. You go with Matt Boyd, or you go with Mike Pelfrey. Out of those 3, I would actually almost consider, if you can't find someone, you go with Matt Boyd. I think Pelfrey gives up too many runs. He can really only go about 5 innings, and then that taxes your bullpen, which showed you it did not do well. So the Tigers have got to have better consistent hitting heading into next year. They've got to play a little bit better defense as well in the field. Castellanos, of course, once he got injured, did not come back and play. He should definitely be back next year as well. So if the Tigers can avoid injuries next year, which I know every team gets them, but if they can avoid injuries, I think the Tigers could be definitely better. I did say they would get 90 wins this year. That would have actually put them in the playoffs. And it didn't do it. They ended up, I think, with 86 wins. 85, 86 wins. So they fell a few wins short of what I said they would. We'll have to see what they look like next year. But like I said, they need more consistent bullpen arms. They need at least one starting pitcher, I would say. And they definitely need to have a more consistent lineup where the guys are going to get hits. I mean, you got Cabrera at first, you're fine there. If James McCann plays catcher all year, doesn't get injured, I think he's okay. He's pretty decent. Kinsler obviously at second. Iglesias at shortstop. Didn't have a great year, but if he comes back and is a good contact hitter next year, you're fine. You got Castellanos at third. J.D. Martinez has good power in right. Maben has been a good hitter this year in center. And, boy, who's their left fielder? I completely forgot who the Tigers' left fielder was, and that's pretty bad. Here I am talking about sports, and I can't even remember who the Tigers' left fielder is off the top of my head. That's pretty bad, I'll tell you that. So let's quickly look it up and see if I can find out and tell you if he's actually a good enough player as well. But, I mean, and the other question is will Brad Ausmus be back next year? Will they make a change and get rid of him? We'll have to wait and see because he actually could be, an issue as well where, maybe they think he didn't do that well of a job managing the pitchers, hitting situations, knowing when to send a player on a hit and run, things like that. And if that is the issue, then he might not be back next year as well. We'll have to wait and see on that. But for some reason, this isn't working. I'm not being able to bring up the Tigers roster, so give me just 1 second. Well, I should have been able to remember who their left fielder was. It was Justin Upton, their newly acquired player from this year. Upton started off very, very slowly this year, but he did finish really hot. He hit a lot of home runs, drove in a lot of RBIs late in the season. If he can do that all year, he could actually have a pretty big monster year next year. He could have basically career highs where he could hit, over 30 home runs. Maybe he could get 90 RBIs in there. His RBIs and home runs actually were above his career average this year, but his batting average was lower. That's something he's going to have to work on. And the Tigers have got to work on, too, not striking out a lot. So that'll wrap up this edition of Sports Talk. Thank you for sticking around for this long episode. I'm actually considering cutting Sports Talk into shorter, episodes, but I'm not going to probably make that change this year. It's probably going to be next year, again, when we start, talking about football. Just cutting them into shorter segments, so that way then if I talk about Western Michigan, that's one segment, and it's going to be that'll be a video about Western, a video about Michigan, a video about the rest of college football. Cut them up into shorter little segments. That way, so maybe you don't have to sit through the entire episode to watch maybe what you want me to talk about. A segment about the NFL, the Lions, the Denver Broncos, you name it. I could shoot shorter videos. But like I said, that will probably start next year and not this year. So we'll test it out probably next year, see how that works. So thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, you can subscribe to my channel for more content. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Those links are in the description below. So next time, this is Michael Loudon. Over and out. Thanks for tuning in. Mikey's crew. You guys are the best. Take care.